Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
Good morning, church. Pentecost Sunday. Anything could happen, and it probably will at West City. I'm not speaking about Pentecost Sunday at all, although I just have. So there you go. Merry Christmas. What I am talking about today is communion, and ultimately my thoughts around communion and kind of where I sit and stand with communion, and I just in reflection this week of how communion is translated to me in one way or another, really came about as I was in one of the most vulnerable positions any man could probably be in, face down on a physiotherapist table with his head between a donut, and getting some work done on my neck. It was down at SportsMed Subiaco, shout out Michael Devine, sorry John. The man does good work, and while he was doing the work, he was doing a bit of dry needling on my neck because he was saying there's some tension there, and he hit a trigger point and it spasmed pretty wildly, and he was like, "Man, this has been here for some time. There's something in your neck that's been here for a while that you haven't really dealt with." And through that process, as he knows, the God-fearing Christian that I am, he reminded me that my body is a temple. And I reminded him that it's actually a mosque and I have a dome at the front, so it's not quite all he's cracking it up to be. But in all seriousness, when he said that, one of the things he was trying to purvey and convey to me was that he can do as much work as he wants on my body in the sense to make it mobile and release tension. But at the end of the day, I need to put the work in outside of it. And I said, that's why I have health insurance. But he genuinely was trying to help me understand that I need to start doing some stretches, particularly with my neck and my upper back, and start to move a bit more, particularly because of my work that I'm in, that I'm quite stationary and at a desk. But his big message to me was, I can do work, but at the end of the day, you have to do work as well. And in that vulnerable position, head through the table, as he's dry needling me, I'm having this epiphany of what communion is like. And that thought that the communion table, quite often, coming to it on a Sunday, is some good work. It's the work that might release the tensions in our life. It's the work that might bring us to a place of reflection and reminiscence, or even repentance, that allows us, that was 3 R's. That was pretty Pentecostal. That was good. I can't even remember what I just said. But just that idea that we are able to come to the table is good work. But where the rubber really hits the road is when we leave these four walls, when we start to do our own work outside of this place, when we start to put what the table represents to us, that all are welcome, that there's no pre-qualification to have to receive. When we walk out of these four walls, do we still offer that to others? Went really quiet. I'm looking at Steve. He's my center point today. But genuinely, that's the hard work. That's the stretching that we're put under to ensure that the tension that maybe we've brought to the table doesn't come back in such a hard and forceful point. For me, what that looks like is when I'm driving. Just this morning, I'm on the way here, and I'm cussing out people in traffic that are running for a reason. And Michaela's yelling out the window, "What's the reason?" And I'm going, "Man, we're going to be late for church. I don't even have the milk for coffee yet." It was a hard time. But genuinely, we're going to deal with that at the table later. Where the rubber's going to hit the road is when we leave this building and we enter the car park of IGA again. And I have to deal with people that don't know how to drive down a one-way path. But I'm going to work on it. And just like all of us, I want to invite you to the table later today to take some time of reflection, of repentance, of reconciliation, there's another 3 R's, of whatever that means for you, whatever that looks like in your life, wherever there might be tension currently built up between the now but not yet in that space of who is Christ, maybe not knowing fully or not seeing him this week in your own lives, the table is open for you as well. So good luck.
Well, here at West City, as Steve has just pointed out, like we have this rhythm every single year where after Easter, we'll spend like a really decent chunk of time going through the Sermon of the Mount, right? Looking at the teachings of Jesus, doing a really deep dive into this whole thing about what it looks like to be living in the kingdom of God, what it is like to participate and be in right relationship with God and with the other, and your neighbor especially. And even though it's only really like 100 verses, there's only like 3 chapters in it all, like we do this every single year. I'm really thankful for that because it's like, a reminder for us as to what God's kingdom really looks like. And there's so much depth and meaning and layer and things that we can just dig out from there. It really is basically a bottomless pit, right? And I know there's a big lot of you here who are massive fans of the Bible Project. And you would know that they are doing, and they're spending the whole year doing the Sermon of the Mount and just doing a really, really, really geeky look at everything that is the Sermon of the Mount. And when I found out that I was going to speak on it, I'm like, yeah, this is wicked, I've got this resource that I can really tap into. And even though, I wasn't going to say plagiarize, but I was, but I had full intentions to borrow a lot of their material. Then I got word as to what I'd be speaking on, and then I realized that, hang on, it's later on. And if you know the Bible Project, they sometimes they spend an entire episode in the podcast looking at a single word and stuff like that. So I think they are pretty much on chapter 6, and I'm like, damn. Damn it, I got to do the work myself. So, all right, let's get into it. First slide, please, Kerry. We are going to look at a bit of artwork. Can anyone guess what I'm going to be talking about this morning? That's right. Yes. Origin of the Spider-Man, as told by ancient artists. No, we'll be looking at Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 5. And just go back to the artwork. I think that's the tamest artwork I could find, because if you really go to Google and you type plank in your eye, and you go on images, there's some pretty wild and grotesque pictures that come up. It's like, oh my God, okay. But yes, we're talking about Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 5. So let's read. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. All right, I'm going to make a bit of confession. I have to admit, I really struggled, big time, coming up and preparing for this message. I don't know whether it's a case of writer's block or whatever else, but it was really, 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 really difficult for me to get the ball rolling on this. So I do apologize in advance that if whatever I'm about to say comes across like this incoherent, ramblings of a crazy man, then it is what it is. You guys just got to put up with it, all right? So, but yeah, so much of my difficulty stems from how hard can it be? This message is just why can't we just don't be douchebags and just be kind to one another and just don't judge one another, right? That's it. That's the end of my message. Goodbye. But yeah, the more I thought about it, though, as I was working through it, then I was like, hang on. In saying that, I have actually started to judge the very people who are judging others. And how am I necessarily different from them? Because really, it is really the water that we swim in, isn't it? Like, it is so easy for us to kind of dive into this mode of judging ourselves and judging others. Like, it really isn't that hard because it's, like I said, the water that we're swimming in. I think it stems from, in my opinion anyway, the story of scarcity that the world tells us, and we subconsciously tell ourselves that our definitions of success, and whatever that might mean, is predicated on this idea that I have to be better than you, right? I have to have more money, I've got to have better things, whether I am right on this matter or that matter or anything else. Like, I think there's a lot of that we are swimming in, and I'm not necessarily against this whole thing about ambitions and whatnot, but if our success, as we know, is defined in this way, and that in terms defines who we are as people, in my opinion, I think that is problematic, right? So I think that perhaps there is a better way. So, like I was saying earlier with the Sermon on the Mount, the overall premise of it is that Jesus is teaching us about the kingdom of heaven and what it looks like, and to be living a righteous life, to live a right relationship with God and with one another. And in my opinion, it is all rooted in this very, very simple fact that we are all created in the image of God and His likeness. And we should really all do our best to treat each other likewise. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27, it reads, next slide. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. In verse 27, so God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female, He created them. The late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, whose writings and teachings are very important to me and influence how I read the Old Testament and especially Genesis, and he has this to say: what is revolutionary in this declaration is not that human beings could be in the image of God. That is precisely how kings of Mesopotamian city-states and the pharaohs of Egypt were regarded. They were seen as the representatives, the living images of the gods. That is how they derived their authority. The Torah's revolution is the statement that not some, but all humans share this dignity. Regardless of class, of color, of culture, or creed, we are all in the image and likeness of God. But this in itself raises an interesting question for me. Like, what is the image of God? For those of us who professes to be the followers of Christ, I believe we only have to look at this verse in Colossians chapter 1, verse 15, which reads, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. We only need to look at Jesus and what He was like and how He lived on earth, loving the least of us, loving the oppressed, loving the marginalized, to give us an image of what God is like. I mean, there is a whole sermon in that verse alone, and I won't really get into it that much because I want to move on to something else, but it all really boils down to who we see in the person of Jesus, especially in the Gospels. I feel is the perfect image of God. But I want us to perhaps have a bit of a look at and borrow some of the stuff from our Jewish brothers and sisters and in the Torah, and especially in some of the rabbinic midrash out there. Because while chapter 1 in Genesis tells you that we are all created in the image and likeness of God, in Exodus, they were explicitly told not to make any image of God. Because to do so is idolatry, which creates this weird sort of a paradox because we are essentially, in their view, in some Midrash traditions, we are, in a sense, created in the image of an imageless God. How do we reconcile that? Right? Kind of weird, but I think as I was reading through the commentaries and stuff like that, it brought me to the discourse that Moses was having with God at the burning bush. He asked God at one point, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's asking God, look, who am I going to say sent me when I go to the Israelites? And in most translations, it says, I am that I am, right? Most of our modern English translations anyway. But really, according to a lot of Hebrew scholars, apparently that is not the right way to look at it. The more accurate way to look at the phrase is, I will be what I will be. Or I am becoming what I am becoming. One of the commentaries I've read put it this way: the voice was not claiming to be an object, but rather a process, the process of becoming, of unfolding, of evolving. So in the sense, by being created in the image of an imageless God, a God that transcends nature, a God that is beyond our wildest comprehensions in terms of who he is and what his image is like, it affords us the opportunity to participate in God's continuing unfolding and becoming in this world. One of greater love, of greater inclusivity, of deeper levels of reconciliation, just to name a few things. We're now just going to switch modes a little bit. We're going to jump from the collective we to the singular I, and to recognize that I am created in the image of God and his likeness. In Matthew 22, when I believe it was a rich man who asked God what the greatest commandment was, and asked Jesus what the greatest commandment was, his famous reply is this two-part thing of love God with all your heart, with soul, your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. As if to say, you cannot actually love your neighbor without loving yourself first. Because I know within myself that I am really at my worst when my self-image and my self-worth is at its lowest. And I am at my worst judgmental self whenever that happens. And I feel the need to judge others in order to basically make me feel better about myself. And when Jesus spoke in verse 3 in chapter 7 about paying no attention to the plank in your eye, I believe he was talking about our innate abilities to completely ignore our pain and our insecurities in order to judge other people, so that we can feel better about ourselves. Like, I don't know about you guys. I mean, the original picture did show like this giant plank in your eye. I would imagine that would be pretty painful. Let's just put it that way, right? To have this enormous log in your eyeballs. And I think there's a lot to it, that if we can only take the time and the courage to not only recognize the pain that's associated with that giant log in your eye, but also its subsequent removal, and have the courage to do both and face up to that, then only then can we see more clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Thanks, Jordan. In the words of Irish poet David White, pain is a lonely road. No one can know the measure of our particular agonies. But through pain, we have the possibility, just the possibility, of coming to know others as we have, with so much difficulty, come to know ourselves. I'm really not doing this justice. Like, if you guys actually want to listen to David White, he is awesome in terms of, I really love Irish poets and how they speak and stuff like that. So anything being read by Irish people is like next level awesome. Like we do that all the time at our home church. Like, I would just play like Irish people speaking. Right? Anyways, moving on. I've spoken up here. I've stood up here a few times already, and anyone who've heard me speak, you all would know that I'm fairly open about my journeys with my faith, transition, deconstruction, evolution, whatever the heck you want to call it, right? There was a period of time where I went and decided to question literally everything about my faith. And I think I really went full scorched earth with it and just like literally just threw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I don't necessarily recommend it, but if you can hack it, it's awesome. I think, I don't even know I'm coming up the other side yet, but it is what it is. But one of the things that I felt really needed to go is this concept of penal substitution atonement theory, and how that is being preached to us as the gospel, and that is what the whole point of the crucifixion and everything like that. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about with penal substitution atonement theory, or PSA for short, firstly, it is actually a good thing that you don't know about this. But secondly, come see me afterwards if you have questions about it, because I'm intentionally not saying much about it, because I would disappear into a bit of a rabbit hole and just like lose myself in that. And then it will probably become like ramblings of a madman up here. So we'll just leave that aside for the time being. But all that is to say that I fundamentally disagree with a lot of the things that was preached in that manner, and that how it was the gospel. And I found myself subsequently becoming very angry, and also very at people, first of all, people who told me that, and I was just being quite judgy at people who believed in that still, right? And then it really, 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 really took a long time for me to come around that, and for me to realize that that is coming from that place of pain that I was talking about, and the place of pain that comes from the grief that something is dying within me, and I don't know how to deal with it. And in order for me to feel better about myself, I feel the need to judge someone else about how they believe this is right and this is everything, So, I now hold the view that we are all created in God's image, and we are all on our own journeys. And it is impossible to divorce our own lived experience from faith and our theology. And it really doesn't matter very much about believing this or that, or what the right atonement theory is and all that kind of stuff. As long as we live right by God and with neighbor. I have one final quote from Richard Rohr, who puts it this way: when you honor and accept the divine image within you, yourself, you cannot help but see it in everyone else too. And you know it is just as undeserved and unmerited as it is in you. I call this the principle of likeness. From this frame, you stop judging and start loving unconditionally without asking whether someone is worthy or not. The breakthrough comes at once, although the realization deepens and takes on greater conviction over time. Right, we're going to land this plane now. We're going to look at Luke's version, actually, of the Sermon of the Mount. Now, Luke chapter 6, the second half of Luke chapter 6, there's this thing called the Sermon of the Plain. It's kind of like Sermon of the Mount light. Like, it only goes for like 30 verses or so. So, the fact that this passage about judging others actually appears there, I feel like kind of highlights its importance, like that it's something that we really should take time and dive into, right? So let's just look at one verse 37, and I've taken the liberty to tinker with it a little bit. Do not judge yourself, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn yourself, and you will not be condemned. Forgive yourself, and you will be forgiven. Let's start there and see where that takes us.
How good was that message? Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at West City, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.